What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News. And I want to talk about some robberies. One comes to mind is a fight between Chavez Sr. and Parnell Sweet Pea Whitaker. You know, and if anyone ever saw that fight, it was very controversial because Sweet Pea had clearly won the fight and they called it a draw. I remember Bert Sugar published a episode of Sports Illustrated because he was the editor-in-chief back in those days, in the 90s. And on the front of it, it had Parnell Whitaker and Chavez Sr. And the label stated robbery, you know? And it was a robbery because, you know, they wanted to save face for Chavez because that was actually supposed to be Chavez's coming out party against an American fighter. Unfortunately for him, he was in there with one of the best fighters in the world at the time, Parnell Sweet Pea Whitaker, a slick, cagey, very experienced southpaw, you know, an Olympian. And Parnell Whitaker clearly was the matador and Chavez was the bull. And he showed Chavez what a true American representation was. Okay. Sure, they gave that fight a draw, but it wasn't a draw. Everyone knew that. You know, just like Bondu Jack and De Gaulle wasn't a draw. You know what I mean? They did that to save face. You know, the politics that be saved the day for certain guys. You know, but I believe Chavez Sr. knew that he had lost that fight. Hopefully, if his ego has calmed down since then. But you know, as it shows for most boxers, your ego just gets worse when you retire. So. Now you can compare that fight to the fight with Canelo and Lara. You know, Canelo took that fight with Lara, another southpaw, slick, experienced fighter that clearly outboxed Canelo. You know, clearly, you know, there are differences between Canelo and Chavez Sr. You know, but there are some comparisons. They were both boxer punchers. You know, they both like to work the body. The only difference was Chavez, he liked to work the body and he was a pressure fighter. Canelo's not a pressure fighter, you know. He's more of a counter-punching guy. He waits for openings and he uses his boxing ability if he can. But what happens with Canelo, if he's not the best boxer and he's in there with someone that can box and move, you know, like a Leonard or Mayweather or Lara, you know, he's going to have problems. And he's going to have problems scoring. He's going to have problems with consistency because he's not a pressure fighter. You know, Canelo has to be set to punch. You know, that's why his feet are planted. You know, but it's also a good thing for Canelo because he's never been down. Just like Chavez was never down, you know, until he stepped in the ring with Frankie Randall. You know, Frankie Randall was the first one to drop Chavez. So, you know, and his aura of invincibility was then, you know, gone. You know, but Frankie Randall was the first to do that. Canelo, he's still a young guy, so he hasn't began yet to get in there with bigger guys that can punch. That's why I think Golden Boy wants to avoid that, you know, confrontation, so to speak, with a guy named Golovkin, because Golovkin has the power and he also has the skill. So, you know, those fights with robberies, man, you know, it's unfortunate because you have fighters that are good. You know, Chavez was great. You know, take nothing away from Chavez Sr. You know, he was a pressure fighter. He was like Angulo with better boxing ability. You know, because Angulo is a rugged brawler. Chavez was a boxer puncher, but still applied the same pressure to his opponents. That's why he was able to get guys out of there. You know, when he fought Taylor, you know, he was losing that fight. You know, and you know, they stopped it in the 12th round. You know, so that saved his legacy once again. But make no mistake about it, Chavez lost that fight. Whitaker won. Whitaker was the ridicule of a lot of different fights. You know, he was done unjustly. There's a lot of fighters like Pernell Whitaker was one of the best in the world. You know, absolutely a Hall of Famer. You know, and then other guys, you know, the history still repeats. You know, like Landy Lara. You know, he clearly beat Paul Williams. He did everything but knock Paul Williams out. You know, he didn't drop Paul Williams, but he clearly beat the guy. You know, and it's amazing. Just like Kovalev Ward, no one, look, your expressions on your face can't lie. A person can lie at the end of the day, but your expressions can never lie. You know, Ward did not know he was going to win that fight. He didn't. You know, he can tell you, oh, I thought I won it. You could tell that. You could say that after the fact, after you got the decision. You know, but that's all in the game. You know, that's all. You know, guys have been taught to go with the program. You know, so he got the win. He was like, hey, you know what I mean? He was excited. He did not know that I won that fight. He didn't know. So, but these robberies, you know, unfortunately, that's a problem in boxing. And I think that will always be the case. So it will always be the sport that I love, that I hate so much. It's the sport that I love, that I hate so much. So, but anyway, you know, that was a pretty good fight between Pernell Whitaker and Chavez, but Chavez lost. You know, Canelo lost, in my opinion. You know, but at least it wasn't a complete robbery where they gave it to the wrong guy. They just called it a draw and said, fuck it. You know, don't get back in the ring with Whitaker. You know, so. But anyway, that's my take on that, guys. Stay tuned for some next Counterpunch boxing news. You guys been counterpunched. Peace.